A defining trait of a wall is its visibility, typically, but the virtual world does not follow the same rules as the physical one and requires a wall not to be made of matter, not to be seen, and sometimes games can actually get pretty clever with it. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 20 more invisible walls in video games. Yep, we've done a video on this already. Shocking, I know. But there's some pretty funny invisible walls out there. Like in SpongeBob, Bikini Bottom, Paper Mario, Halo 3, Serious Sam 3, Mother 3. A lot of threes in that one. But also in Far Cry 2 and 6. If you dig what we're throwing down in this video, go watch that one too. Without any further ado, starting off at number 20, it's Fallout 4's End of the World. Normally, if you wander too far away from the playable area in Fallout games, you'll just get hit with a ton of radiation and a message telling you to go back. And honestly, if all else fails, to just hit you with a regular old invisible wall. But in Fallout 4, with the prologue, they really make sure you stick to the developer-mandated path. When the bombs start falling and you flee your house, instead of heading towards the Fallout shelter, just go anywhere else. Go too far in any direction, and the game will reward you with nuclear annihilation by literally dropping a bomb. And I mean a bomb. I don't know, maybe an H-bomb. Off the top of my head, I can't remember whether it was atom or hydrogen that they were blowing up on the beginning of Fallout 4, or if it was even specified. It was nuclear bombs. That's what matters. The funny thing about it, though, is that it's not on a timer or anything. You can waste as much time as you want during the opening, as long as you stick to the required path. It's just, if you go out too far, the apocalypse is like, no, not over here. And number 19, the high on life terrifying sandworm. In order to reach the high-tech city of Port Terrene, you need to pass through the dusty surfaces of the planet first, with deserts stretching in all directions. Anytime there's infinite desert in a sci-fi game, there's probably a sandworm somewhere, and no surprise, there's one in this game as well. Wander around the edge of the map, and you can even find signs warning about sandworms, so it's pretty obvious when you're in the danger zone. It does let you ignore the signs, and if you keep going too far, it'll trigger a cutscene where the beasts attack. It looks like it fits the bill at first until the worm's face opens up to reveal a cartoonishly goofy second face inside. I mean, it's high on life, so the aliens look cartoonish, so yeah. It's one of the rare sandworms that doesn't actually kill you, or at least you don't see it kill you. It just roars, you put your hands up, and then it fades to black. So I guess, like, there's a chance that these sandworms are just like, no, man, you're not allowed over here. This is sandworm territory. You go back to your territory. It's not that I'm a big, unknowing, hungry beast. I'm just, you can't step over the line. There's a line here. Don't do that, okay? Thank you. And number 18 is Alan Wake 2's The Darkness. The streets of noir New York seem like they stretch on forever, but like basically everything else in the dark place, it's an illusion. If you intentionally try to travel outside the normal map, your vision will get blurry before the screen fills up with dark clouds. If you keep moving forward, you'll eventually just find yourself walking back into the play area. It's clever because it doesn't feel like an invisible wall, because you keep moving forward. You don't really feel like you're stopped. It's just that you got automatically turned around. It's a loop. Or sorry, maybe it's not a loop. It's a roll. Not sure if I'm supposed to say that or not, but that's what he says.
The story determined where I could go and where I couldn't.
And number 7 is the Assassin's Creed series, the area not available in the current memory. The early Assassin's Creed games were filled with invisible walls that would feel out of place in an open world game, but they actually had an in-game explanation for them that kind of made sense. Instead of just throwing up an invisible barrier to limit your progress, the game would put up these white glitchy walls when you go close to the edge of the playable zone, and you'd hit a message that was like, area not available in current memory, desynchronization imminent, which is clever because the Assassin's Creed game's central conceit is you're going back in time kind of through genetic memory using a machine called the Animus, so somebody can relive their ancestors' lives. How this all works has gotten a little murky as the series has gone on, but at first they were pretty clear about it. You could only experience and see things that are part of genetic memory, so if a person never went to a different city or at that time this thing didn't happen, you couldn't do it, like the computer doesn't generate it. It's a clever way to explain the limits of the simulation. They're still basically just invisible walls, but they have a legit reason to be there, and it doesn't feel weird. And number 16 is the Simpsons game, where Krusty says to get back. In the Simpsons game, one of the collectibles are literal cliches, common video game tropes and tricks where you find them and the comic book guy disparagingly comments on it. They hit on pretty much everything you can think of, so of course Invisible Wall gets a look in too. You can find one in the level Mob Rules right at the start. You just walk up to this Krusty says get back barrier, which blocks your way across the street, and comic book guy pipes in with,
"Oh, that's real original."
And number 15 is Alone in the Dark, the thing outside the front door. The original survival horror game had a lot of firsts. Remember in Resident Evil 1 where you first tried to leave the mansion in the front door, you get ambushed by dogs? Alone in the Dark did it first. It's funny we're saying it after the Simpsons point, because that's a cliche as well. The Simpsons did it first. But anyway, Alone in the Dark did it a totally different way. Instead of having to deal with vicious zombie dogs, if you just try and leave the haunted mansion, you're confronted by this. It's a big old hellmouth. Completely trapping you inside the mansion. For a game that's mostly pretty goofy these days, it's kind of a creepy reveal. Probably the most Lovecraftian the game gets. And number 14 is Hitman Absolution's Endless Train. Hitman developers IO Interactive are nothing if not clever, so instead of putting a bog standard invisible wall into their levels, they usually go for something a little more justified. Like here, in this one level, there's a train crossing on the edge of the map. You get too close to it, and a train starts crossing and just doesn't stop. It keeps going, blocking off any progress going in that direction through the level, because it's not really going through the level, you know? If you turn around, the train eventually passes, but while you're standing on the edge of the map, it just keeps going. It's one of those situations where they could have easily dropped it, "You're leaving the mission area" warning, but instead they came up with something less annoying. It's not realistic, but I really enjoy the idea that the train just goes until you walk away. And like you look back and the train, oh dang, just when I turned around, okay, I guess I'm gonna go back. Oh, there's another train! I'm never gonna get across here. Also, my hair fell out years ago. And number 13 is Smallland. I don't know how to say the name of the game. It's still in early access. There's a hungry bird, though. I mean, we've seen angry birds, but hungry ones? So you play as a little guy in a huge world in Smallland, right? Smallland? Honestly, keeping it trapped in the small area would be pretty easy with the game's premise. But the devs came up with something way more amusing. If you try to fling yourself out of the play area, a big old crow will swoop down out of the air and grab you. I mean, that's one way to keep people on the map, right? A bird of prey. Let me just give props to my avian brethren in this game. Good job, Giant Crow. And number 12 is Ghost Recon Breakpoint, being eaten by the nano worm. So you'll get shredded by a swarm of drones if you leave the archipelago. It's actually justified because the same swarm of drones forced you to land on the archipelago in the first place with no way out. It's another invisible wall that's decently justified by the story itself. The entire setup for this one is that you've been trapped on this island without any backup because the mercenaries that have taken over activated Legion, the swarm of drones that acted as a defensive perimeter around the island and won't let anybody in or out. If you try to get in a helicopter and fly away again, they'll come back and do it again. Like, there's no reason for you to think that second helicopter is going to do any better. And number 11 is Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts' LED panels. This is one of those types of games that really has to limit the players in some way, because it's all about creating different vehicles to deal with various challenges. On the Xbox 360, that meant a limit to just how high up you can fly and how far you can travel, so every level had to be contained somehow. Most games would just throw in your basic invisible walls somewhere, but in this game's case, Rare got a little more creative. It was also one of the last times they did so, because after this, they just went like, you know what, let's make Kinect games, haha! and they suck. But instead of just forcing players to turn around, when they got to the edge of a map, the game used the premise to its advantage. The whole idea is that these challenges are set up by the Lord of Games, so it's already implied that the stages are artificial environments, which is made clear when you approach the edge of the map, where you find that instead of extending on forever, the levels are actually surrounded by big LED screens projecting a skybox over everything. So let's just say, eat your heart out, The Mandalorian. Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts did it first. What do you have to say about that, Jon Favreau? And number 10 is Lego Marvel Superheroes, the Brooklyn Bridge construction. Most Lego games don't give you the freedom that this one does. You're off the leash right from the start, free to swing and fly around the Lego-ified version in New York as much as you want. Of course, there's got to be a limit somewhere, right? Other than the usual invisible walls, there's also a barrier on the Brooklyn Bridge, which cuts you off halfway through. There's a construction worker who tries to stop you by saying the bridge is being worked on, but if you keep trying to get past them, they eventually give up and admit there's just nothing past him. Like, there's just nothing on the other side of the bridge.
You don't really want to get past it. I mean, officially the bridge is under repair, but I'll let you in on a little secret. There's nothing over there.
I like that. I mean, it's Lego. There doesn't have to be something beyond there. There's nothing saying that whoever built whatever you're doing had to build all the boroughs. And number 9 is Unreal Tournament 2004, blasted by the ion cannon. This all-time great multiplayer shooter had one of the most entertaining ways to keep players from straying too far outside the map. Rather than just a boring countdown followed by instant death, if you wandered too far in the maps that allowed for wandering, the game would just call down ion cannon blasts and, blast you with ions. And if there's one thing that you, as an Unreal Tournament combatant, can't tolerate, it's indiscriminate ion pelting. It wasn't just a deterrent for stopping players from going out of bounds either. It was also a useful strategy to take out people nearby. The blasts are impossible to avoid. I mean, if you can't survive the ions, why would your opponents be able to? And number 8 is Grand Theft Auto San Andreas' High Wanted level. Less invisible walls, more like security systems, I guess. So if you strayed completely outside the intended play area in San Andreas, your wanted level would automatically shoot up and police would pursue you relentlessly until you either returned or died. This is most easily seen at the beginning of the game when you're not allowed to leave the city of Los Santos. Like, jump the barriers or just swim outside the city and you're immediately swarmed by an endless army of cops that want you dead. I remember having a lot of fun triggering this on purpose just to see how long I could last, which is, by the way, usually not too long. And number 7 is Metroid Other M's literal invisible walls. Metroid Other M has a laughable story and some painful dialogue, but the gameplay actually wasn't that bad as long as you're tempering your expectations. It's no Metroid Prime, but what is? One pretty clever idea seen in the game is when you go into the biosphere in the space station, it seems like a vast savanna, but at a certain point you're blocked from progressing. Rather than just being straight up invisible walls, they're walls. The natural environment you're seeing is mostly a projection on a solid surface. It's pretty convincing for a Wii game. It actually had me fooled for a second. And number 6 is Nights into Dreams, blasted back into the level. There were motocross games back in the day that did this, but they weren't the only things that would blast you back into the playable area if you left the stage. The relentlessly weird Nights into Dreams does something like that as well. Nights into Dreams, kind of what Yuji Naka did instead of Sonic for the Sega Saturn. I mean, it seems like Yuji Naka kind of needs to be in charge of a really strange game to distract him from insider trading, because after he ran out of weird games when Battleland Wonderworld wasn't exactly a success, he got busted doing that. Anyway, anytime you fly too far outside the levels, the environment changes into these purple blocks, and if you fly past those, the game loads you into an invisible cannon and shoots you back in the level. There's no explaining any of this. That's just the way the game is. By the way, really good game. Beyond strange. And number 5 is Prototype Infinite Airstrikes. Another New York City adventure with a little more apocalyptic of a twist. In Prototype, you play as a living virus trapped in a madhouse plague-infested New York that's in constant chaos. The military's running wild, there's mutants everywhere, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. Anybody would want out of there, but if you try to cross the bridge out of Manhattan, you'll just get bombarded with endless military airstrikes. Eventually, you'll run into the actual invisible wall, but it can be fun seeing how long you can dodge the airstrikes, which is surprisingly not the hardest thing in the world. And number 4 is Tomb Raider 3's Deadly Subway. Subway tunnels rarely safe in video games. Tomb Raider 3, excellent example. In a level set in London, there's multiple tunnels you have to go through to progress the level, but if you wander too far from the intended path, Lara is just gonna run face first into an oncoming train. And this is PS1 era Lara, who can take on dinosaurs without breaking a sweat. I'm sorry though, you can't dual wield pistols at a moving train and expect to win. If I've learned anything from these games, it's never go down a dark subway tunnel ever. I don't care how well endowed the lady you're following is. Don't follow her down one of those damn dark subway tunnels. And number 3 is Pokemon Sword and Shield Mr. Mime. Remember that mime from the Family Guy game? This is that, but in Pokemon form. You see it at the Spikemuth gym, which is unique in that it plays out like a beat-em-up. You go down this long city street fighting Pokemon trainers that get in your way. To keep you in the combat zone, there's a Mr. Mime in your way, pretending there's a wall there, which of course there actually is. So yeah, creative way to show an invisible wall without straight up blocking you for no reason. I mean, that's never stopped the Pokemon games before. They throw up invisible walls all the time, but in this case, the Pokemon Company came up with something a little more creative than the usual nothing. And number 2 is Slayer's X, Terminal Aftermath, Vengeance of the Slayer. This intentionally shitty FPS perfectly captures a very specific era of first-person shooters. It's basically Redneck Rampage if it knew what it was doing. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in this one, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on exactly what any of it is. In the Cottonwood mobile home level near the end, you're instructed to go forward on this road, but there's nothing stopping you from turning around and headed back towards the tunnel. If you do it, which any self-respecting secret hunter will, then you'll suddenly get ambushed by this flying skeleton monster the wiki just calls Skelly. It's the only enemy like this in the entire game. All it does is chase you, and if it touches you, you die. It's a nasty little trap that serves no purpose other than to block you from progressing in that direction. And it's too fast to get past, it'll just kill you every time. Say what you will about the game, they do know how to keep you on your toes. And finally, at number 1, Dead Meets Lead in Malaria. This totally unknown Steam shooter has one thing and one thing going for it. It is absolutely insane with the invisible walls. These things are everywhere. They're nearly impossible to avoid, and when you hit them, the game will flash a big malaria warning, and you start getting swarmed by bugs that damage you and slow you down. With what? What are you getting? By the bugs? From the bugs? Yeah, the way this game limits your movement is malaria. It's so stupid that it's almost funny if it wasn't so annoying. In any other game, the flashing screen and the bugs would be enough, but these guys knew this invisible wall needed the extra touch. Gotta flash the word malaria in giant letters. Perfect! Ship it! And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.